Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode. We're discussing the collapse of the Lebanon Truce, Israel's ground invasion of Syria, and Russia's intervention to protect Bashar al-Assad and secure its influence in the Middle East. In this episode, we'll pull up the war map to better understand where these military operations are happening and why. Keep in mind that all the information I share is factual, not opinion-based, but it will shed light on how October 7th exposed betrayals and the game of interests. Let's start with Lebanon. I've already mentioned that the Lebanon agreement was a fragile truce, and Netanyahu wouldn't stick to the ceasefire. So far, Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon have continued. According to the Wall Street Journal, the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon risks sparking a regional war as Netanyahu rearms the Israeli military. Warships, fighter jets and supply drops are delivering weapons to Israel. What's coming next? Bombing Lebanon, destroying Syria and destabilizing Iraq. Israel is rearming and the war is ongoing. But who's stepping in to fight on Israel's behalf? The answer is Syrian militants. An article from the Israeli newspaper Haaretz explains this well. Gadi Eisenkot, former Mossad chief, openly admitted that since 2011 Israel has been arming Syrian factions. This began during what was called the Syrian Revolution in 2011. Eisenkot reveals that Mossad equipped these groups to weaken both the Syrian army and Russian and Iranian influence in Syria. Now here's some dark comedy for you. When the Syrian Revolution began, militant factions like the Syrian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood and extremist groups claimed they were fighting Bashar al-Assad, labeling him a traitor and spy. They destroyed one of the strongest air forces in the Middle East, all while claiming they were doing it for Jerusalem. Similar rhetoric was used by extremists in Egypt's Sinai who attacked the Egyptian military. These so-called revolutions were actually US-Israeli plans to dismantle the region's states. Let's go back to the war map. Syria is surrounded by Turkey to the north, Lebanon below, and Israel further south. The areas marked in red are controlled by the Syrian army, supported by Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran and Russia. The green areas are controlled by Syrian militants, backed by Israel, the US and Turkey. Now, about Turkey. President Erdogan portrays himself as anti-Israel, but in Syria things are strange. Turkey aligns with Israel and the United States, especially since the Turkish army is a NATO member. Erdogan wants full control over the Syrian border, including provinces like Idlib and Aleppo, which are rich in natural resources. The United States promised Erdogan he could annex these regions into a greater Turkey, but told him to stay away from the yellow zones on the map. These areas are controlled by Kurdish Forces, also known as the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, who are supported by Israel, the United States and NATO. Turkey opposes these Kurdish forces because they aim to establish a greater Kurdistan, which would carve territory from Turkey, Iraq and Syria. So Turkey collaborates with Israel and the United States in the green zones against Assad, Russia and Iran in the red zones, while simultaneously fighting the US-backed Kurds in the yellow zones. Speaking of the yellow zones, they contain regions east of the Euphrates River, rich in natural gas, oil and farmland. Under Trump, the United States divided these areas. Turkey gets Idlib and Aleppo, while the Kurds keep control over the oil and gas fields east of the Euphrates. Erdogan dreams of extending Turkey's border deep into Syria, but the United States is firm about keeping Kurdish-controlled zones intact. In 2018, Turkey launched a military operation called Olive Branch to seize a purple-coloured area on the map, previously under Kurdish control. Turkey justified the operation by claiming Kurdish forces there were building missile platforms and military bases supported by the United States and Israel to target Turkey. This brings us to the question of why Iran supports Assad. The answer lies in sectarian reasons and the strategic need to transport weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And why does Russia back Assad so strongly? Russia's military doctrine revolves around securing both cold and warm waters. For Moscow, access to the warm waters of the Mediterranean through Syria is non-negotiable. To conclude, Syria is no longer a unified country. The map now looks like a cake sliced up among different powers. The yellow zone contains valuable gas and oil fields, while Turkey, Israel and the United States carve up the rest. This is the game of interests and betrayals we are witnessing today. Unveiling the truth, who sparked the clashes in Syria? The Independent recently shed light on who ignited the tensions between the Syrian opposition, which is essentially composed of terrorist organizations, and the regime's army. Notice how the UK labels individuals or groups. If they're terrorists, they call them terrorists. If it's a state's regular army, they'll refer to it as the regime's army. Similarly, in Egypt, they used to refer to the Egyptian military as Sisi's militias. Now back to Syria. The military operation carried out by these terrorist groups or extremists started from two main axes, which I'll explain shortly. The attacks began in western and southern rural Aleppo. Syrian soldiers were captured, among other developments. But that's not all. Reports suggest that Russian forces are also involved in this conflict. Russian and Syrian air forces launched airstrikes on the opposition's front lines. But here's the question, why did Erdogan comply with American and Israeli demands by initiating this military operation? After all, Erdogan supports these armed groups. The answer lies in Erdogan's desire for the Syrian government to recognize Turkey's military presence in Aleppo and Idlib. Essentially, Erdogan is pressuring Bashar al-Assad, saying, "We'll normalize relations with Turkey on the condition that you acknowledge the Turkish army's right to be in Syria." This is part of a broader strategy to dismantle Syria. Take note. Turkey's role in the ongoing conflict against Iran and Russia is becoming clearer. Recent reports indicate that Turkey has deployed massive reinforcements to northern Syria. Russia, in turn, responded with airstrikes to prevent the advance of armed elements. To clarify, I'm not suggesting that Russia has any vested interest in Palestine. It's all about self-interest. For example, the Syrian opposition declared full control over western rural Aleppo. But again, this isn't about siding with Assad either. It's all a game of interests, with everyone looking out for their own agendas. The Syrian opposition claims they are fighting Assad as a stepping stone to liberating Palestine, yet their actions first destroy Syria, all in the name of freeing Palestine later. It's all rhetoric. What's happening now is part of a US-Israeli effort to eliminate Iranian and Russian influence in the region. Refer to the map I showed earlier, marked in red. Some might ask, isn't there a truce in Lebanon? Yes, but it's a sham. During this supposed truce, they're attacking Syria. Hezbollah leaders and their families have reportedly relocated from Lebanon to Syria, with some settling in rural Aleppo and others in Damascus. This ongoing military operation is essentially a transference of the Israeli-Iranian conflict to Syria. The so-called truce in Lebanon is a facade. The Independent even warned of the genuine risk of a Third World War, not an exaggeration but a reality. Russia's involvement in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon and Ukraine is growing. Just yesterday, Putin delivered a chilling speech threatening to target decision-making centers in Ukraine, like the central bank or government headquarters, aiming to destabilize the Ukrainian state entirely. In a historic address, Putin boasted about Russia's missile production surpassing the combined output of NATO countries. He unveiled Russia's Orshanik hypersonic missile, which he claimed has a speed of Mach 10, 10 times the speed of sound, and produces temperatures of 4,000 degrees Celsius. For context, that's close to the surface temperature of the sun. Russia isn't just focused on Ukraine and Syria. According to the Financial Times, Russia, with Houthi cooperation, has been recruiting Yemenis to fight in Ukraine. Hundreds of Yemenis have mysteriously traveled to Russia and joined the conflict alongside North Korean forces. Putin is reportedly offering these recruits $2,500 to $5,000 monthly and a path to Russian citizenship. Meanwhile, Russia provides Houthis with coordinates of Western ships in the Red Sea to enable targeted strikes. Ukraine, on the other hand, has been leveraging private military companies and mercenaries across NATO nations to counter Russia. The Independent also reported on a secret meeting between Iran and European powers, including the US, Germany, France and Britain. The meeting discussed Iran's role in supporting Russia with missiles and drones. Iran was allegedly offered reduced sanctions and eased Middle East tensions in exchange for withdrawing its support for Russia in the Ukraine war. Netanyahu recently declared that the ceasefire in Lebanon is not the end of the war, but a mere pause that could end abruptly. The Israeli army spokesperson claimed they've destroyed 70% of Hezbollah's capabilities, targeting over 12,000 sites, including 360 in southern Beirut. As we navigate these developments, the risk of global conflict looms larger than ever. The US has approved a massive $600 million arms deal, but has agreed to extend banking relations with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Why? Because if they don't, the Palestinian Authority could collapse. The pressure is on and Israel is stretched thin, fighting in Lebanon, striking in Yemen and Syria, and engaged in the Ukraine war. This isn't the time to create new problems in the West Bank. However, in return, the US has reassured Israel that the UN Security Council will not recognize a Palestinian state during Biden's presidency. What happens during Trump's presidency, though? That remains to be seen. So what's the summary? Look at October 7th. The US labelled it a terrorist operation, but what we're witnessing is the result of a 10-year-long game of interests in the Middle East, starting from 2011 until today. There's no such thing as a cause or defending the nation anymore. It's all about power plays and interests. What will the future hold? We'll have to wait and see what the coming days bring. And that's it, my friends. That's the heart of the story.
Thank you for watching. We hope this video added something new to your understanding of recent events. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated with our daily news. For those interested, we've also included a few recommended products in the description below. By checking them out, you can support our channel through small commissions from YouTube at no extra cost to you. Here at Daily News AI, we're committed to bringing you fair, factual news. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care and see you soon.